Good afternoon. I am the Wolfman, and this is Rabbit Trails. It is 12:10 p.m. on Sunday, the 19th of January, 2025. I'd like to explain a concept of rest versus action, alignment versus friction, and voluntary control versus channeling, and the interplay of these three axes. Axes, I don't know how you say it. Before I get into that, minimal background, I do have an experience that I call channeling. Now, you've seen, or you can Google, or you can check on YouTube, and you can find Abraham Hicks, or Seth, or Paul Selick, and these are all examples of channels. And they all do it slightly differently, and I do it in a completely different way than all of them. I am also not making any claims to supernatural abilities. I think everybody can channel. I don't know what channeling is. I don't know if hyperdimensional entities are speaking through me. I don't know if it's aliens or angels or God come in the form of such and such, or just spirit speaking through me, or source, or if it's just all being generated by my unconscious mind. I do know that the experience is of being the conscious mind, right? Like most of us, you may not think about it, but you and I experience going through life as a conscious agent. So, like, I'm thinking thoughts, I'm making decisions, there are things I'm aware of. And then there are also things that I am not controlling and not aware of. That's the unconscious, if it's part of this, of what we consider ourself. So, I have all these unconscious processes. That's not generally debated. Most people understand that they have unconscious processes. Your heart beats by itself. Your breath breathes by itself unless you take control of it, which is where the breath becomes very interesting, because it's the perfect balance between voluntary control and channeled, right? Because it's you breathing, but most of the time the breath breathes itself. And so that's what channeling feels like. It feels like the breath breathing itself. When I started channeling, if we want to call it that, I was just meditating, and I started speaking, and I immediately had a voice in my head, a thought, if you will, that I shouldn't be speaking. And then the response that came out of my mouth was, "You're not speaking, you're just sitting, we're talking." And again, it doesn't need to be anything spooky. This is something that anybody with an imagination and a meditation practice can do. I'm not making any claims to supernatural abilities. However, I am making a claim to an ability that is useful. And even if it's just some form of self-hypnosis that helps me dig down to some of my root issues, this channeling thing that I do is very useful. I'm also not saying that it's not aliens or spirits or whatever speaking to me. I'm saying I don't know what it is. I'm saying that I have an unconscious mind, and when I pay enough attention, it really feels like there's another living inside with me, inside my brain. There's me, the conscious mind, and then there's the unconscious mind, which is this vast, primordial thing that's so powerful and so old, and kind of grumpy. Sometimes, mine at least, seems to be a little bit grumpy. Maybe that's just because I don't treat myself well enough. It's a little bit grumpy with me. Who knows? But, yeah, so all of that is preamble to understand that, like, I have, now I'll bring in the practical of my own life. I have recently switched from a 9-to-5 job, 9 to 5, as an aircraft mechanic. And I've quit my job, at 38 years old, and I've enrolled in college, and I'm going to school. I'm going back to school now. And I'm doing all that on the GI Bill so that I don't have to work. And it's been really a good shift, but it's also been challenging in that it's all very unfamiliar. There's hugely unfamiliar levels of just freedom in my real life, like real life freedom, being able to do whatever I want whenever I want, which includes day drinking and watching TV all day. These are things that I can do, and nobody's going to stop me, and then I just have to deal with the consequences of those. And this freedom is something that I have to adjust to. I mean, it's something that I wanted, and I'm certainly not complaining, but it is an adjustment. So, I need to build a new skill set when it comes to instituting my own structure. And so, I've been paying very close attention to my motivational patterns. And what I've noticed is that on school days, I wake up before my alarm goes off, and I'm very excited, and I can feel the magic flowing through me, right? And you don't have to believe in magic to understand this. It's a feeling. The feeling is real. You can call it magic, you can call it energy, you can call it being moved by the Holy Spirit, you can call it prana, you can call it just feeling good, you can call it energy. To me, the thing that makes the most sense is that it literally feels like I'm connected to some kind of a current of magical energy. That's what life force, the force, whatever. So some days I wake up feeling this, and it just feels like being excited about the day in a lot of ways. It's another way to phrase it. Remembering that words are never actually the truth. I'm trying to describe the truth to you. But the words are always going to be one step. They're going to be words, not truth. The experience is the actual truth. So I'm trying to describe an experience to you. And that experience is that, today, I woke up feeling that feeling. I felt good. I felt like, let's get out there. I felt like I had magic in me. I had energy to do things. If it was a video game, my blue bar would be full, and my green bar would be full, and my red bar would be full. I felt good. So, in this, and today is not a school day, but that generally has been happening on school days, and it happened today, and today I was supposed to go help a friend take care of some storm damage at their house, which feels like a very meaningful thing to do. Then there's the days when I don't have to go to school. And then I just have a list of items that, they're not due today, but they are going to need to be done eventually. Schoolwork, home repairs, pay my property taxes, get my income taxes done, things like that. I've just got this list of things to do, things that I can do, things that I want to do, but none of it is deadline oriented, really, or the deadlines are so far out that they don't affect me emotionally. So on these days, not all of them, but a lot of them, I wake up with what you might consider depression. I have a hard time doing anything, and so I want to day drink or I want to watch TV. Okay. And some days I do indulge myself in these, addictions, whether it's behavioral or substance. And some days I fight it all day. And, I don't get anything else done. But my accomplishment for the day is, I didn't drink today. And that is a thing. That is a thing that happens. And so this is the pattern, right? And so my question... So ideally, I go out for a walk every morning. And I figured out why I want to go for a walk. And this is for me. I find that it's consistently good. It's consistently pleasant. It's consistently mentally and physically healthy. And it's low cost. I can do it. It's not like running sprints, which is dreadful or whatever. It's like, yeah, I could go for a walk. And even if I feel like absolute crap, I'm hungover, I haven't gotten enough sleep, fluish, yeah, I can go for a walk. It would be nice to go for a little walk. I don't have to walk fast, don't have to walk far, just go out and just go out in the sunlight and go for a walk. That's generally good. So I've got this, ideal that I'll go out. I'll go out for a walk. What's up, Francis? Go ahead, find yourself a spot to sit. You're on video. Hope you know you're about to become part of the Wolfman's Rabbit Trails channel. So, if you don't want to, I'm gonna take you sitting here in my lap as consent because you don't speak English and I don't know how to get your informed consent. So, whatever. Anyways, cats ever get legal rights, I may have to give them royalties for these videos if I ever start getting paid for them, which I don't. That's okay because I don't. It would be nice to get paid for all my creative activities, but even if I never make a red cent off of anything creative I do, I'm still going to keep doing it because I love creating. And so, be still. If you're going to be here, be still. Where was I? Right, so I'm out for my walk this morning, and the thing that I generally do on my walk, I realize this is a lot of background information, but that's what it is. I am getting to a point. What I generally do on my walk is I make peace with the future, which is to say, what am I doing today? Am I happy with my plan for today? What am I doing within the next couple of weeks? What am I doing with my life? Do I understand what the point of what I'm doing is? Do I understand what I'm doing? Do I have a goal? Am I oriented towards something bigger than me, more important than just satisfying my hedonistic pleasures? Is there something meaningful that I'm aiming towards? I make peace with the long-term future as far out as I can, like with what I need to get done for today. So I'm like, okay, which I don't think that's necessarily necessary for everybody, but for me, I have a hard time being in the moment unless I feel secure and safe and the thing that makes me feel safe and secure is this plan that I've got for the future. And I don't generally follow the plan. But having the plan makes me feel safe, and so I haven't been able to let go of that yet, and I'm not sure that I should. At the moment, I have no intention of letting go of that. So that's what I do. Do I know what I'm doing today? Okay, good. Then once I've made peace with the future, I don't necessarily make peace with the past. If the past comes up during this process, then I make peace with it. But I'm not going to dig into my past to see if there's anything in there that I need to make peace with. If my subconscious mind or spirit or whatever brings something up from the past that I have an emotional reaction to, and I go, okay, what's going on with that? And I explore it a little bit, and I try to let go. And that I just deal with as it comes. If the thing that is outside my conscious mind brings me stuff that is outside of the present, brings it into the present, then I deal with it in the present. But once I make peace with the future, which I think on some level it would be nice to just let go of that, but I'm not sure. But once I make peace with the future, then I just get into the present. And I do that by going through my senses. So what can I see? And it might be objects like there's a tree, or like if I'm actually doing it in this room, there's a powered cooler, there's a hot plate, there's a salt and pepper grinder. You can't see any of these things. These are all behind the camera. There's a cat. There's, toolbox. There's a Red Bull. And then, what kind of, or instead of objects, it might be colors like orange, brown, green, red, I may go with that. Then what are the sounds? I can hear a fan. I can hear my stomach grumbling a little bit. Yeah, that's about it. I can hear the sound of my own voice. I'm imagining the sound of roosters because that's the sound that I was expecting to hear, but I didn't hear it. Often I can hear birdsong or roosters from in here. Yeah, so those are the sounds. And then feelings. I can feel a little tension in my lower back, in my right ankle. I can feel the weight of the cat in my lap. I can feel the heat of the cat in my lap. Feel a little tension in my neck and upper back, which just by feeling it, it releases and I get that good pop, which is fantastic. I can feel the coldness of the Red Bull in my right hand. Be still, be still, be still. Be still. He's looking at me with so much anger. Oh, that's funny. Anyway, I can feel, yeah. Yeah, so those are the things I can feel. I don't really smell anything. It's a neutral smell, or a smell that I'm used to. And my mouth tastes like mouth and Red Bull. Okay, so that's the process. You just witnessed it. That's me getting into the moment physically. I'm in my body. I've gone through my senses. Oh, are there any emotions I feel? It's just it's just a general happiness. It's not like, it's not crazy. I don't feel really too much of anything. It's peace leaning towards happiness. Or a sort of non-energetic happiness. A still happiness. Okay. So, I'm out of my walk. I make peace with the future. I decide what I'm going to do. I get into the present moment. And then I do my invocations, but that's neither here nor there. I do what I do to get a hold of my higher guardian angel, or whatever you want to call it, where I talk with the part of the universe that's larger than myself, to include the part of my mind that's larger than myself. I have a little ritual that I do to get into that, but that's not important for you. That's mine. And so there I am. I've made contact with the other than conscious. I have gotten into my body. I also like to acknowledge that there is no self. There's an experience of being a person, but there doesn't necessarily need to be a conceptual self at the center of that spirit experience in order to make the experience happen, or to hold it together. That's unnecessary. So I like to acknowledge that there's, in reality, no self there, but there is a conceptual self, or a concept of no self. Like, the thing is not self or no self, because those are both concepts. So there's experience, and then there's concept, and I think most humans live both in the conceptual level and in the experience. So I like to acknowledge that there is an experience. And that goes along with that naming things with my five senses. Like, I call it, the thing that I'm seeing, I call it a powered cooler. But what is it really? And then I don't answer that in words. I just look at it and I experience the experience of seeing it. Right? So that I'm not living in the name, like the powered cooler. I'm living in the experience of seeing one. Almost impossible to talk about. You can only really talk around it and hope people that understand. Hope that people will understand, I should say. So, right. So acknowledge that that self is a concept, and that we live in concepts and in self. And I acknowledge that there's a thing that we call death. And if you're living in the world of concepts and you have a concept of self, what death means is that thing that you call yourself going to end someday, and you've got a limited amount of time to be in that self. Even if you believe in reincarnation or an afterlife of some kind, this life is going to end. Even if you go to heaven afterwards, this life ends. If nothing happens afterwards, this life ends. If you reincarnate afterwards, this life still ends. So to acknowledge death with the concept of self means that you're acknowledging that there is an end to this, whatever you want to call this life or this incarnation. To acknowledge death with a concept of future, but no concept of self, means that in the future there is an event horizon that I cannot see. No self, but I don't know how to say it without the concept of self. I can't see past the event horizon that we call death. I can make predictions, up to death, up to and including when death might happen. But any prediction that I make about what happens after death is beyond the event horizon, and it could be a completely different set of rules over there. I have no idea. So it's equally foolish to think that there will be no experience after death, or that there will be an experience, or that there will be any specific experience. But even the idea of death requires a concept of future, but you have to have a concept of time and an experience of time in order even just to move your hand from here to here, because it was here and then it was here. And moving through space requires time. If there's no time, there's no movement, because movement is something that happens over time. If there was what you would have with movement if you had no time would just be two identical things in two different places, and there'd be no way to realize that they're the same thing, except that, like, this thing was here and then it was here, and it's the same thing that's moved through time. If there's no time, then you just have one here and you have one here, and you wouldn't even realize. But I digress, which is why this channel is called Rabbit Trails. So I'm out there on my walk. I have invoked my higher things that I invoke. I have acknowledged that the self is just a concept. I have acknowledged that death is coming in whatever form it's coming in. I've made peace with the future. I've gotten into the moment, and now I'm in a very special state, and I'm walking. And I can easily, with like an emotional detachment, not a numbness, but a sort of like an easy, like, I can look at this thing without getting upset about it. Like, it can be fun. I can ponder. I can daydream. I'm in this state. My mind can just hum. Sometimes there are no thoughts. I'll just be walking along, just listening. Crunch, crunch, crunch as my feet walk through the dust. It's great. It's wonderful. It's so incredibly light. So I'm in this state, and I'm thinking about this pattern where on school days definitely, and then on certain days, which I'm beginning to realize are days where I have something meaningful planned, I wake up feeling connected to the current of magic, which I'm not going to keep apologizing for that terminology. You understand what it means, or you don't. You believe in it, or you don't. But that's my experience, and that's what I'm going to call it. So some days I wake up connected to the current, tapped in, turned on, tuned in, ready to go. And some days I don't. And I see somewhat what the pattern of this is. And I ask the question, is it necessary? Is it necessary to feel like depressed, turned off, low energy some days, because I need rest? So am I going to feel excited some days and depressed other days? And is that just the way that the universe is? And I'm quiet. And then in comes the information, wherever it comes from. Comes into my experience, and it goes, okay. So what you're doing here is you're overlaying this feeling of this needing to rest or needing to act. You're overlaying that on top of this feeling of having the energy that creates universes flowing through you or not. Of course, the energy is flowing through you because the radiation of the sun and the universe just always flows. And the light, your heart's beating. If your heart's beating, the magic is in your heart beating it. So it's there, but some days you feel it and some days you don't. That is actually a separate thing from whether or not you need to rest or whether or not you need to act. So, what you've thought is there are two possibilities. One, I feel the energy flowing through me and I need to act. One, I don't feel the energy flowing through me and I need to rest. Not the case. There are four possibilities here. I feel the energy flowing through me and I need to act. I feel the energy flowing through me and I need to rest. I feel I don't feel the energy flowing through me and I need to act. I don't feel the energy flowing through me and I need to rest. These are four separate combinations of these two ingredients. Okay. Okay. So, to simply answer the question, do you need to accept that there is a cycle of rest and action? Yes, absolutely there's a cycle of rest and action. Do you need to accept that there is a cycle of feeling the energy flowing through you and not feeling the energy flowing through you? No. You're able to tap in to source at any time. And in fact, that's the ideal. This is it, them, me, talking to me, right? This is the way I'm hearing it. Okay. And it's not audible, right? A lot of this is in my imagination. I'm aware it's in my imagination. I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. Okay. So, right. So we separate these two things out, and now we understand that we can feel connected to God, connected to Spirit. We can feel the energy, connected to the energy, connected to the magic, the chi, the prana, the life force, all of the time. That never has to be turned off. Now, is it going to turn off? Depending on your level of practice, maybe. Okay, and we'll get into that later about what to do about that, because there is a practical application for all of this. But no, there are things that are just the way it is, and they have to be accepted, because no individual being in the universe can change the laws of physics. The laws of the real laws of the universe cannot be changed by an individual, cannot be controverted by an individual. If you are all that is, then maybe you can change the laws of reality. But if you are anything smaller than the entire universe, including all of its dimensions and all of the different types of energies and matters going through it, then no, you can't change the way it is. And so part of the way it is that there are cycles of rest and action. But it is not necessary for me, Benjamin, to feel disconnected from source sometimes and connected to source other times. But it will be necessary for me, Benjamin, to be at rest sometimes and act other times. And even within the things that we call actions, just like there are spaces between the notes in music, unless you're playing an organ or a fucking accordion or a bagpipe, there are spaces between the notes. There's more silence than sound, actually, even in a sound that is music a lot of times. The same way, like, even within the action there is stillness. And so there's a lot more stillness than there is action, actually. But, yeah, so first answer is we need to separate rest versus action and feeling connection to source versus feeling disconnected from source. Okay, cool. So I get to feel connected to source for the rest of my life if I do it right. Like that is a thing that I can work towards without. It's not like I'm trying to fight gravity to do that. But I should expect to rest for my body, for my mind, for my mouth, for my emotions, for my imagination to be at rest at certain points and to be in action at other points. Okay, so that's pretty much, I think, comprehensively answers the first question. Or it's the first answer to the question. Now, the next answer to the question comes with a sort of visualization, a sort of energetic thing that was built out in my mind. And it goes like this. Over here, we have these three ingredients. We have rest versus action. We have alignment versus friction. We have voluntary action, voluntarily controlled action versus channeled or inspired actions. So, over here, what is rest? Rest is a category. And I'm going to divide it into several subcategories. So you have rest and you have action. What that looks like is the body movement versus stillness. The mental body, or the thoughts, thinking versus silence. The speech, I'm going to go ahead and separate. Again, all of this is one thing. There's only one thing in the universe. I'm only conceptually dividing it out in order to play with it and understand it. Nothing gets divided in reality. This is all only divided in concept and in imagination. So you have rest, and within rest, you have silence. You have action, and within action, you have speech. Within rest, you have stillness. And within action, across from stillness, you have movement. You have thinking and silence, and you have imagining and darkness. Okay? So, within rest, you have silence, stillness, and darkness. And within action, you have thinking, speaking, moving, and imagining. You could also have emoting, I guess, which you could do stillness or silence for the heart. You know, if the heart is either emoting, feeling things, having emotions, or being still. That'd be another potential category you have it. But so you look at all those different things, but you can see how they all are rest. And then the opposite of them, or the other position to be in, is all stillness. Okay, so or all action. Excuse me. So just for ease of conversation, we have all of those things that can be actions. It can be a speech, it can be a thought, it can be a feeling, an emotion, an imagining, a movement, a physical movement. All of these things are actions, and then all of the rests is stillness, silence. It's darkness in the imagination. It is absence of feeling, or just a feeling of peace, a stillness in the heart, a stillness in the body, a silence in the mind, a silence of the mouth. So there you go. You got your rest and your action. Rest and action. Now here in the middle, you have alignment, where you have the way that the universe wants to be. And now the word wants is an interesting one. So water wants to flow downhill. Now, what is the experience of a drop of water? Is it a desire that is being satisfied by gravity? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. Like, there's no real reason to think that water has a feeling that is like wanting to go downhill, the same way that we have a feeling that is like wanting to lie down when we're tired or eat when we're hungry. But when you look at water and you see what it does, there's a sort of understanding that, like, based on its actions, you know it wants to go downhill. Tends is another word. So when I say the universe wants something, it's sort of like that old phrase that the universe abhors a vacuum. Does that mean when the universe sees a vacuum, it's like, ugh, gross, vacuum, I hate it? Not necessarily. I mean, maybe it does feel that way. I don't know. But based on its actions, it's sort of metaphorical that the universe abhors a vacuum. So water wants to flow downhill. The universe wants to be a certain way. So if the actions that I'm doing are in line with the things that the universe wants, that's alignment. Anytime I start, like, if this is the path of least resistance, that's alignment. And that's, with an infinite level of calculating forces beyond what I could possibly mention in a video. The path of least resistance, calculating all of that down, which the subconscious mind seems to be able to do a pretty good job of. But to try to do it consciously is a fool's errand. So that alignment, right? And when I have that alignment, that's when I feel connection to source, and that's when I feel that magic flowing through me, right? But then as soon as I start to get confused, I start to feel bad, I start to not know what I'm supposed to be doing next, I start to try to force things, I start to try to make something work, then it starts to feel bad, and I start to get out of alignment, and it feels like friction. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't put great effort into things. A tremendous amount of effort. You can watch somebody who's in total alignment doing like a dance, or building a wall, and lifting bricks, shoveling dirt. You can do all of these things with tremendous amounts of energy expenditure, but it's without resistance. You're doing this in tolerance of the way that things want to go, and things don't dull as quickly. They don't break tools. You don't break tools as often. You don't snag your pocket on the door handle when you're in alignment. Generally speaking, when you're these are the ways that you feel. It feels good. It flows. A lot of times it goes well with a rhythm for some reason. Like you can, like when you're talking, even though this isn't a song, but you can still put a rhythm to it. And there's like, my speech is not out of rhythm because I'm flowing right now. And so even though it's not a song, there's still a rhythm to it if you pay close enough attention. And the same thing goes with when you're working and you're in flow. Playing, working, the lines blur, but that's alignment versus friction. And so we'll get into what you do when you start to feel the friction, because that's, again, for the practical application. Then over here, you have voluntarily controlled actions and then inspired actions. And so, like I said, the breath. So I can take voluntary control of my breath, and I can, then I'm holding it, and I'm still talking, but I'm holding as much of my breath as I possibly can, but only letting out enough to speak. All right. Or I can let go, and I can just let my breath breathe itself. And now you could say that my breath was inspired, which literally means God breathed. And so the breath is breathing itself. You can call that God, or you can call that the breath breathing itself, the universe doing the breathing. Like the part of the universe that is the oxygen in my lungs are doing the breathing without any interference from me. I'm just talking, right? And so the breathing is just happening. And when I was holding my breath and speaking, I felt on a certain level, because I'm kind of reporting in real time what I'm feeling, which is a little bit interesting to do. But I felt a little bit of friction, but it was almost like fake friction, like play friction, or friction on a certain level, but flow within the entire system. And so, but, if you, as absurd as it is, if you were to fight your breath all the time, you'd be exhausted, and you'd be feeling this crazy amounts of friction. And so in the same way, as I'm going through life, if I wake up in the morning and I feel friction, well then what I'm doing is this, and it's creating the friction, and that has got to be voluntarily controlled action every single time. That is never, inspired action never creates friction. Automatic action never creates friction. Now that doesn't mean that being on autopilot is always a good idea, because if I'm completely on autopilot and I'm not engaged, then one of the forces that runs within me is habit. And that may be a habit to day drink, and I might end up drinking whiskey every day, and then I end up getting off the rails, and I get so uncomfortable, So that's not that's a close. It's like a weed that mimics a flower, right? So there is this weed version of autopilot that tries to look like alignment, but really it's just not taking the appropriate action. In reality, you are fighting something somewhere, but you're just pretending that so you go get your drug, or you go get your video game, or you go get your Facebook, or you go get your, binge eating, or whatever it is that you do to get out of the present moment and to ignore the things that you're supposed to be doing that you have some resistance to for some reason. And it feels like you're not voluntarily controlling the action, but that's the other side of it. That's wrong somehow too. So I wake up in the morning and I feel resistance. Okay, stop it. Right? And again, doesn't mean that I'm not going to need to rest or I'm not going to need to act. What it means is that I need to stop let go of the voluntary control and just allow, just be receptive. Get into a place, get in darkness. If I can get into actual physical darkness where there's no light, silence around, external silence, so there's no sound coming at me. If I can lay down, great. If I can't lay down, then sit down. If I can't sit down, then stand still. If I can't stand still, then just walk. There's stillness within all of these things. And so if I feel that friction, then the idea is to stop forcing or fighting whatever it is that I'm forcing or fighting. And so I slowly disengage from whatever I'm doing until I get to a level of external stillness where my spirit comes to rest. Because if I am doing inspired actions, then my spirit is at rest. Because it takes an act of will or volition or spirit to fight the Tao, the current of the way that the universe wants to work. And you're allowed to do that. In my experience, it's not a lot of fun. But actually, it can be kind of fun. It's like rock and roll. It's like that distortion. So, a little bit of, just a little bit of resistance on the side so that you can feel how powerful the current is. It can be a lot of fun, actually. Perfect balance doesn't move. So to have a slight imbalance here and there can move us around, and it can be fun. None of this is a question of moral right or wrong, all right? And also, I'm a trickster and a fool, and I don't have all the answers. Or I might not have any of the answers. So this is just Wolfman reporting from the field, But it was a really interesting walk this morning, and it was a really interesting concept, and I did want to record this video, and you could do whatever you want to with it. So when one is at rest within themselves, you might be acting, you might be moving, you might be speaking, you might be thinking, you might be having emotions, but what you're not doing is forcing or fighting. You're at peace within yourself. Even within a torrent of emotion, there's some level, some center that is still and at peace. And so if I feel the friction, then what I am to do is to start disengaging with the things that I am doing until I start to feel that inner peace. And that it may be necessary to go all the way to lying down on my back with one palm up and one palm down in a dark, silent room until my thoughts and emotions and spirit can finally come to rest. It may go that far. Or I might have it might be a nanosecond where it's just some internal adjustment. I need to just let go of something that I was holding on to, and I come to that peace. But if that doesn't work, then I'm slow down on whatever it is that I'm doing. Pull the bike over to the side of the road. Throw it neutral. Kick the kickstand out. Turn off the podcast. The thing that I'm listening to. Just slowly disengage things, moving towards that absolute darkness and silence until I find that peace. Then from the peace, I go, okay, here it is. Can I feel the magic? Yes, I can. Okay, cool. So now I'm calm. I'm connected. I am feeling the magic flow through me. What am I doing? What do I want to do? And maybe it's rest. It's going to be different in every situation. Maybe it's like, well, I think we're in the middle, we're on the side of the road somewhere because you were having a panic attack on your motorcycle and you pulled over to do that here. So the next logical thing to do is finish riding home. All right, cool. Let's do that. But let's do it from this place of feeling connected to Source and having the magic flowing through us and feeling at peace and in love with life and the universe and all of that. That the actual external action doesn't change all that much a lot of the time. have I covered everything? I know I've been kind of all over the place, but I've been sort of trying to paint a picture. So yeah, I think that's the thing that I was trying to build. So I hope you can see this thing. So you have rest and you have action. You have alignment and friction. And over here you have voluntary action and inspired action. We touch on that a little bit more. The idea is not to float through life with your hands off the control and let Jesus take the wheel. That's a step, but that's not where we're going. The idea is that eventually inspired action and voluntarily controlled action become one and the same. Because the person who is doing the small self, the little me, little Benjamin here in the world, is becoming one with the source of inspiration, God, the universe, the energy that creates worlds. So instead of at the beginning being this little vessel that's inspired by this divine force, great. Eventually, the vessel and the divine force become one in marriage with Christ, as the Christians would say. It's a union between the animating force and the physical vessel until it becomes one. So yes, in the beginning, you've got to let go. Every time you're trying to use your volition to go against the Tao or the will of God or your true will or, the path of least resistance or whatever it is that you want to call it, the thing that you're supposed to be doing, then you want to relax off of that so that you can get back into alignment, feel that current flowing through you. Because what we're trying to do over here is make it so that there is no voluntary action and it's just inspiration flowing. You're just channeling. Everything that you say is the Spirit speaking through you, and every move that you make is the Holy Spirit moving you, which is cool. Like, you could live an entire life like that and it would be very neat. You probably would do some amazing things, but it's not the end goal. Beyond that is this idea of a complete union or a blending between the vessel and the source, to where you're like, I am making these decisions. I am voluntarily doing this inspired action. There's no difference. Now, of course, free will never goes away. So even after in eternity of being blended, vessel and source, you can always use your free will to create friction again and to come back out and to be your small self and to not be braided between your true will and that's always possible. And now I think I've talked about everything. So there's rest versus action, there is alignment versus friction, and there is voluntarily controlled action and inspired action. And the idea is to have all your actions be inspired and to eventually blend the small self and the higher self to the degree that there is no difference between a voluntarily controlled action and a higher self. You're in alignment all the time, and in that blended higher and lower self, in aligned action all the time, you have a cycle of resting the different parts of yourself at appropriate times and acting at appropriate times. Ta-da!